until Sunday as well, and was not doing well as the morning went along. So I did send him home and doing well as the morning went along. So I did send him home, and so Detective Werther will be our last witness today.
Okay.
I presume that Detective Duncan will be hopefully better tomorrow.
Right. All right. So depending on, well, when we finish with this witness, whether it's before or after our noon break or afternoon break, we'll conclude for the day at that time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry about that.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss before we bring the jury in?
Not that the state's aware of.
No? Okay. Let's bring the jury in. All right, the jury is now present. Everyone may be seated. You can continue with this witness.
Thank you. So Detective, before the break, we had just admitted Exhibit 209, a PowerPoint that you created utilizing the GPS data that was extracted from Charles Vallow's phone, correct?
Yes.
The cell tower data that you obtained through, that you were able to obtain from search warrants on cell phones for Lori Vallow and Alex Cox.
Correct.
As well as incorporating some of the video that you had obtained from Burger King and the Walgreens.
That's right.
All right. We had attempted to see if you could control this from your location, but you were not able to, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to have you sort of tell me as we go through when to proceed to the next stop, okay?
Very good.
So on this first page, is this just describing for us the cell phones and the data, where you obtained the data from?
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk to us about what we're seeing here? What is this for?
Yes. So I tried to have a slide for each set of records incorporated into the presentation. These are records I was provided. It's not necessarily the case that every one of these things is depicted at some point in the presentation, but these are all the records I was provided, about this number ending in 5452. Throughout the presentation, I'll refer to most of the numbers by their last four digits. It's just easier than listing the whole thing out, and they all have unique last four. So the listed subscribers is listed there, and then also the contact name that was listed in the subscriber records, and then you can see what each of the files was, primarily CSV or XLSX files. These are spreadsheets like you would open in Excel.
Okay. Next.
Yep. Okay, there we are. This is the same title for a different phone number ending 9562. You'll notice this one is T-Mobile, and the way T-Mobile provided their records is a lot fewer spreadsheets. It just happens to be the case that Verizon tends to provide an awful lot of files. It's just the way they maintain their records, and we don't control that.
So some of them have records that one spreadsheet may include everything from calls to cell tower locations, and others, they separate them all out.
Correct. Different businesses choose to keep their records different ways. We don't dictate it. We take what we're given and then we analyze that.
So this 9562 number is for Lori Vallow.
That's what the subscriber information listed, yes. And here we have the records related to a Verizon number ending 9120, listed subscriber, Mr. Alex Cox. This is again Verizon, so as you can see, we have that multiple number of spreadsheets in the manner that they tend to provide them.
And those are sort of the things that were on those thumb drives when we were talking about
Correct.
each exhibit.
Correct. And then this is going to represent the data extracted from Mr. Vallow's phone after the fact. This report that I incorporates only the locations logged by the device. There's other data on the phone that I don't address here.
Okay. And then you referred to the evidence item of the CH131035-001.
Yes.
And that's the impound number for that cell phone.
Yes, that's the Chandler PDSI number for that particular device from which the data was extracted. I mentioned some of this earlier, but again, I have it on the screen here representing that these are location data expressed as latitude-longitude pairs, as you would see in many other circumstances. Any given device may log them more frequently or less frequently, but we can examine the phone and see if they are present. And then for the data point marker, if you would click advance once, when it's represented on the screen, it's going to be represented as a dot with no particular radius, because the way that the device stored the location, it provides a latitude and a longitude, but it doesn't make any assertion as to what the error rate on that is. It just says, here's the latitude and longitude that the device recorded on this date at this time. As we go through and we're looking at location data inferred from cell site connections, you will see pins on the map, and they're color coded because one of the easier ways for people to tell which thing we're looking at is what color it is. So you saw in the last slide, I had assigned the GPS location data the color of red. That's just as an arbitrary assignment. And then we have blue for one of the phone numbers attributed to Lori Vallow. We have purple for one of the other phone numbers attributed to Lori Vallow. We have green for the number attributed to Alex Cox. When you see these, those will be what they're associated with. And also, because that can be hard to remember, each slide that represents those records will have tabs up at the top to remind people of what they represent. We can advance, I think. This shape that you will see when we're dealing with cell site connections, this is a visual representation of what the estimated coverage area of a particular cell site would look like if you were above it looking down. So there's the way that the records are stored and the way that they're returned to us by the cell phone providers. They will indicate a date and a time a connection was made. They'll give sufficient information to identify the tower to which it connected and also the face of the tower. So cell phone towers have multiple faces that a device could connect to, and that's going to indicate a direction generally. And then one can estimate what the coverage area of that face of the tower might be, and that's represented on the map as an estimate of the device's likely location area.
So when we're talking about the cell phone itself giving you the GPS location, is that more specific than this cell tower data that you're receiving from the providers like Verizon and T-Mobile?
Yeah, so there's there's a distinction between precision and accuracy, right? So precision is how precisely the thing is defined. So what area? So when the GPS location data says this exact latitude and longitude to some number of decimal places was logged at this time, that's very precise. That doesn't mean it has to be very accurate, but it does mean it's quite precise. What you will see when these devices are connecting to cell towers is you're going to see relatively large areas where the device is inferred to have been. It likely was in that area. This is different because the device didn't record this location. The provider recorded that on this date, at this time, this mobile device connected to this tower on this face, and we know or are able to determine the approximate coverage areas of those towers. But it's not more precise than that. It's a much more general area. This is another representation of that shape. So this shape is derived by people in the industry by testing the way that these antennas work in what's called an anechoic chamber, which is a fancy word for a room that's designed to reduce the interference with the propagation of radio waves. So if this represents what a coverage area might look like under lab conditions, one thing to keep in mind is that the real world basically never mirrors lab conditions. This is an estimated area where you would expect an antenna to likely have coverage. And that's what it's represented for. And then if you click forward, it just shows the direction the antenna face was pointing. If you are looking at one of these shapes on the map, then that center line is what's known as the azimuth, which is essentially just the angle at which that face of the tower was recorded to have been facing.
So you're not able to tell us within this area where the cell phone may have been located?
Not without a different type of data or a separate corroboration. It's to say that the likely coverage area where the device likely was is somewhere in that red shaded area.
And so when you talked about trying to use other sources to verify this, we talked about Charles Vallow's phone and looking at the GPS data, for instance, with the Walgreens. Are you doing the same thing with the cell tower?
Yes, that's correct. It's with any of the data that we're given that asserts to represent.
We need to talk. It's not you. Well, it is you. I can't keep doing this anymore.
Okay, well, how reliable is that, and what ways can we determine if it's reliable? And so in all instances, I'm looking to see other corroboration that that location data appears to be accurate. This is an example of what the mapping will look like that you'll see throughout this. So this is just a section taken from a slide that was generated, and I put it up front so you can see in advance what it's likely to look like at different points. So if you click forward, this is going to represent in Google Earth Pro, they have this timeline slider bar that allows one to interact with what time it is. So up top, that should be visible, and there'll also be notation, and it'll show approximately when the events depicted on the screen took place, and it'll be a range. It can be widened or narrowed as needed. And if you'll click forward. So as we just discussed, the estimated location for the device ending 9120 would be somewhere in that green shaded area. And if you'll click forward, the iPhone, which was recording its locations as pinpoints, those are all expanded out, but you see how the lines all draw to the same approximate place. That means that for a period of time, it was in a same location, and when one clicks on it, they all balloon out to show that they're all tied back to that same place. So you would expect the iPhone to be in the area where those all tie together. And if one zooms in, you get a more precise look at that. And then if you click forward, then the estimated location for 5452, somewhere in the lavender shaded area, you'll notice that they're sized differently. This size is an estimate based on cell phone tower density. It can vary by provider, and it can vary by the area because as a general rule, cell phones seek the strongest connection that they have available to them. So when the device connects to the tower, that tower's area may be greater if there is less density of cell towers around, and it may be smaller if there's more density. And then the last thing is a reminder of what those tabs up top are for. Those are just to help a viewer keep track of what they're seeing on the screen.
All right. You told us that you mapped just July 11th of 2019, correct?
Correct. So this animation is showing location data derived from the cell phone. So you'll see the tab up top reminding you what the color coding means. And it shows the True by Hilton, 1950 South Santan Village Parkway. And that the location data is in that area in the early morning hours and also in a few areas nearby, but then returns to that area.
I don't know why I did that. Hold on. So we're looking, you have 7:16, Charles' iPhone is in the area of the True Hilton. So this is AM, correct?
Yeah, so it's, and forgive me, I'm going to use military time because it's what we do. But 0000 is midnight through 7:16. This animation covers that range of time, and it's playing through what the locations do as one scrolls through that time, including that they end and the True by Hilton. These can be somewhat graphically intensive.
Okay. So as you're continuing through the morning, you continue mapping the GPS of Charles's phone?
Yes, so
I don't know why it's doing this.
we may need a different machine.
May need to what?
A different machine. Okay, this time frame that you saw depicted partially is showing that from 7:16 to 7:31, all the individual recorded locations describe a path, and that path leads from the True Hilton along major roadways generally, and then comes at around 7:31 to the area 5531 South Four Peaks Place. And then it goes slightly past that to 7:37, which marks the last outgoing communication sent by the device before the shooting is known to have occurred.
We'll keep trying this one, and if it messes up again, I'll switch to the other one.
All right.
So just so we know, when was the 911 call?
The 911 call was at 8:36.
So at 7:37, you see the last outgoing communication. That's a text message sent by the phone.
Correct. This is advancing from 7:37 to 7:49 and showing those various location hits in the general area of the Four Peaks Place house. And then at about 7:50, which as it notes is 45 minutes before the call would be made to 911, the device leaves the area. And then it zooms out and it shows that it is 7:52, which is about 43 minutes before the call will be made to 911. The device associated with Alex Cox, specifically the 9120 device, makes an outgoing call to the 9562 device associated with Ms. Lori Vallow.
All right, so we see the little house icon is the residence where the shooting occurred, correct?
Correct.
And we see Lori Vallow's phone at this point at 9:52, utilizing a cell tower that is overlaps some, but it appears to be away from the residence.
Yes, so the pin is the location of the cell tower that is being connected to in each of these cases. So yes, one would notice that the cell tower being serviced for Ms. Vallow's device is a bit farther to the north in this case.
And then you said that there is a call from Alex Cox's cell phone to Lori Vallow's cell phone?
That's correct. So we've added on the map the location of the Burger King at 2865 East Ocotillo Road, and you can see the red dots again representing the GPS locations from Charles Vallow's phone, arriving at around that time. So we're looking from 7:53 to 7:56, and the device is at or near where that Burger King is located.
And so when you went to Burger King, let me ask this, the prior map that we saw, did that cell tower cover the area of where this Burger King was or is?
It may have. The thing is, all these locations are estimates, so it's in the area. It likely covered it, yes.
Did you then utilize that video that we talked about to confirm that Charles Vallow's phone showing in this area appeared to match the SUV as well as Ms. Vallow being there?
Yes, it appears to match this visit to the Burger King, which we are now seeing. This is the video that I recovered from the Burger King.
All right, so this was a video that, so you could identify the vehicle and at least see the license plate on that?
Correct.
And as you watched it, this one doesn't depict the, or you can't see the driver on this video, right?
Right, there's another view coming up.
Okay. So this one just shows us hands going in and out?
It does. It shows the view showing the vehicle. This is one of the views that they have of their drive-through.
So if we forward to the next slide,
Yes.
we will see from the inside the service of.
Correct. So this is their drive-through window view. Again at 7:54. Bless you.
And so did this appear to match the receipt that you had received?
This did appear to match the receipt, and this I was told as well, and that document was associated with this transaction.
So the time matched up as well as what they appear to be purchasing in
Correct.
the video.
Correct.
Now in this video, were you able to see if there was someone in the back seat?
I can't particularly tell if there's someone in the back seat.
So you could tell there was a passenger though.
Front seat passenger, yes. All right, so we see the vehicle pulling away. It's almost 7:56 according to their timestamp. We can now advance. This video as well is going to show at about 7:56 as the vehicle leaves from that view at the drive-through.
So again, we're seeing that the times that are documented on Charles's phone seem to appear with what you're looking at from other independent sources.
That's correct. So here we have the location data from Mr. Vallow's iPhone is now moving north. You see those few hits that are rendered in red. That's from 7:56 to 8:06. So that's the time that the vehicle just left and going forward 10 minutes. And then at 8:06, there is this outgoing call from Alex Cox's device to Lori Vallow's device. And you can see the service area for Ms. Vallow's device has also moved north to an area that covers the same area where you see those red data points for Mr. Vallow's iPhone.
So now it's clear that from the mapping that Charles Vallow's phone, the GPS data appears to be in the general area of where Lori Vallow's cell phone is utilizing a cell tower.
That's correct.
And Alex Cox's phone appears to be utilizing a cell tower in the area of the residence at 5531 South Four Peaks.
That's correct.
Then we have a phone call at 8:06. At this time, has 911 been called?
Nope. This location data now goes to an area where there is a Walgreens in Chandler. This is, again, location data for Mr. Vallow's phone. And then it goes north and west to a different Walgreens. This Walgreens at 785 South Cooper Road is the one from which I eventually obtained video. And we see it's arriving around 8:16 in the morning.
Did you go to that other Walgreens?
I did not go to that other Walgreens.
Did you call them?
I did not.
So you picked the right one. You called this Walgreens. Were you able to see that the phone was there for a while?
Yes.
And did that give you a clue that this was the Walgreens that might have some relevant information?
More likely, correct.
So we see those red dots again identified as Charles Vallow's iPhone, the GPS data that was extracted from it. And we see that his phone is in that area around 8:08.
Well, it moves to that area. So at 8:08, it was at the one on Lindsay. And then from 8:08 to 8:17, it moves up to the one on Cooper. And that's where we are now, is at around 8:17.
And we can tell that from the up on the left-hand corner.
The slider up top. Yep.
Okay. So then you went to that Walgreens after you confirmed and you obtained video from them?
That's right.
And is this the video?
This is the video. You can see the timestamp at 8:16 as she walks in. And then I think we can advance to the next. So these are just multiple views that they had. The video at the door was motion activated, so I don't control when it starts or ends. Those are the clips that they had.
So she's buying 2 pairs of flip-flops.
As indicated in the receipt. You'll see on their timestamp, we're now up to 8:20 and the transaction is completed. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. All right, so this shows now a time span from 8:17 to 8:33. You see that the next location hits move over to Lawrence Life Academy at 8:33 at 1305 South Gilbert Road. So this is a couple minutes before the 911 call. And then we see the 911 call depicted in that coverage area in the green towards the bottom of the screen. And it shows 8:35 and 54 seconds is when the outgoing 911 call is placed. It shows that number there to 911, indicating that the call is outgoing from the 9120 number associated with Mr. Alex Cox. And the last location data that we see in this time span for Mr. Vallow's iPhone is up by the Gilbert and Ray area.
So where we see that red dot is where Lawrence Life Academy is, or in the general area of that.
Correct.
And then we see that still back at the residence at 5531 South Four Peaks is Alex Cox's cell phone, and this is when he finally makes the 911 call at 8:35.
That's correct. This is an excerpt from the Chandler Police Department's CAD report in this manner, showing the call received and connected at 8:36 and 21 seconds. And this is specifically relative to this case. You can see our report number in the first line of text entered by the call taker.
And is that, again, to verify that phone call you're seeing occurring on Alex Cox's phone records matches up with what is being received?
Exactly. And then here at 8:49, we would see, looking at the location data on Mr. Vallow's phone, it's moving south, and that it's about at 8:49 that it arrives in the neighborhood at 5531 South Four Peaks Place, rather. and specifically on that street. So just looking at the data, you would expect the device has now arrived in the area of the house at about 8:49.
Now, you told us that this GPS data, that you have no control over when a phone is documenting that. So it's not like every minute or every 5 minutes that it does that.
Correct.
You're just given the data you're given. That's when it marked again that where it was.
Correct.
Did you then, again, to try to confirm that this is in fact, his phone is back in the area by looking to body cam footage to show the arrival of Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan?
Correct. So one way of corroborating if the device is traveling with her and if it arrives at about the same time, our body cameras are all time stamped. The officer happened to be wearing his upside down, so I'll fix that for you in a moment on this slide, but you can see the timestamp there. And if we advance, I highlight a couple of things about this slide. I highlight the sandals. I invert the timestamp so you can read it properly, and I do the conversion because it's in Zulu time, which is Greenwich Mean Time, which is always 7 hours ahead of Arizona. So you have to do a little conversion to get to 8:48 in the morning.
So that again matches with the GPS data from Charles Vallow's phone showing that his phone was now back on scene.
Correct.
Now, you continued to track the phone for the day.
Yes, so this shows the time span 8:49 to 9. The phone is near the Four Peaks house, as was Alex Cox's device. Advancing a little bit, we see that now Alex's device is up in the area of the Chandler Police Department. And another way that I can check that that appears to be accurate is that I know that he was transported there at about that time.
All right, so we saw, before this went purple, that Lori Vallow's cell phone and Alex Cox's cell phone were in the area of the 5531 South Four Peaks,
Yes,
along with Charles's iPhone.
yes,
And then we see movement of Alex's phone to the Chandler Police Department.
yes, that area where it was at the end of the slide before the animation overpowered the machine was showing a coverage area that includes the Chandler Police Department.
So what are we seeing here then?
Okay, this is just advancing forward through the day. So showing that if you go to the noon hour, then between 12:13 and 12:36, the device moves up to an area by Santan Village Parkway in the 202. And then there is a tower connection with Ms. Vallow's device ending in 9562, showing that device is also in an area served by that tower.
So in this time frame then of 12:30, we see both Charles Vallow's cell phone GPS data and Lori Vallow's cell phone utilizing a cell tower in the area of Santan.
Yes, that's right. So this is again showing the trail of those location data points moving forward in time as Charles Vallow's device is moving roughly east. And you can see also connections made by Lori Vallow's phone and by Alex Cox's phone in similar areas at similar timeframes until we get to a point where the device arrives at this house at 1658 East Shari Street in Santan, which I understand to be Mr. Alex Cox's residence at the time.
All right, so the address of 1658 East Shari Street in Santan was Mr. Cox's residence. And now at 1:40 or so, 1:30 to 1:40, we're talking about Charles Vallow's phone sending GPS data that it's in that area.
Yes, that's correct. So now looking at 1342 to 1407, so that's 1:42 to 2:07 p.m. You see multiple tower hits from both of Lori's devices, and you also see persistent GPS location data from Mr. Vallow's device in that same area. Specifically, this call that you're seeing now in the lavender is known to be a call made to Detective Inkland's desk phone.
All right, so we have Lori Vallow in the area of her, utilizing a cell tower in the area of her brother Alex's house, along with Charles Vallow's iPhone being in that area of his house.
Correct.
And then we see a call to Detective Enclan's desk phone by Ms. Vallow.
That's correct.
And were you aware that Detective Enclan had called Lori to ask them to return to the scene?
I was aware of that.
Were you actually at the scene?
At that time, I don't think so.
Okay. You were there earlier.
That's correct.
So,
No, I'm going to correct that. I was there at that time.
okay. You were still at the
I
scene?
was still at the scene at that time, yes.
2 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, so this next map or slide that we see, what is this time frame we're seeing?
Okay, so this advances just a little bit. So it's 1409 to 1418. Again, we still see red location hits for Mr. Vallow's iPhone. We still see blue for Ms. Vallow's 9562 number. And we see this lavender one come up for her 5452 number. It's an outgoing call to a particular phone number that I know to be associated with the Valley of the Sun mortuary. If you advance to the next slide.
Maybe.
Oh, now you can advance. I was just highlighting the number. This is that same number on their website.
So at go back, at 2:18, Lori
Correct.
Vallow is calling the Valley of the Sun mortuary.
Yes. So here we advance this area. This is going up closer to 243. You'll see location data for the iPhone starts trending westward and is eventually going to arrive again in the area of 5531 South Four Peaks. That's at about 3:11 p.m. when it arrives in that area.
Now, you indicate in one of the icons up there that from 209 to 243 or 1409 to 1443, that you also had noted Lori's, both of her phones associated with her, the Verizon and T-Mobile, as well as Alex's Verizon phone, were initially in the area of Alex's house in Santan. And that sort of throughout that time period, you're saying.
Correct.
And then we see initially Charles's GPS coming back to the residence at 5531 South Four Peaks and arriving there around 2:43.
Arriving there around 3:11.
Right.
Yep, correct.
So we know that because we have to again look at the slide up at the top. That's when it arrives there.
Correct.
After that, did you become aware that Charles Vallow's cell phone was handed over to Detective Enclan?
I did.
And then presented to someone later in your forensics unit to download, extract, so that you could use it for instance, this.
Correct. It was assigned that item number I listed earlier in the report, and then it was submitted for extraction, and that's how I eventually obtained that location data that you've just seen.
Did you look at any other days to do GPS data?
I did not.
Was this day looked at because you were trying to see what was going on with both Miss Vallow, Alex Cox, as well as Charles, and later just his phone?
Yes, specifically, we initially had concerns about the timeline I was initially asked to look at, and I looked at it at that time, noting those issues, which led to recovery of video and things. Is not primarily my case. I was.
Ladies and gentlemen, phone seats to stay off or you will be asked to leave the courtroom.
As it's not primarily my case, beyond that, I would have done whatever else I was asked to do, but I wasn't asked to look at other days in this case.
So ultimately, your what you determined was that the timeline of Lori Vallow leaving when the 911 call was and returning back was not accurate?
Yes, as I understood, based on, again, the multiple different ways now that we're able to corroborate location not only of devices that are relevant, because we knew at this point that she had Charles's phone, we knew numbers for her phones, we have video of her at various places. It led to the inescapable conclusion that either the shooting did not happen that close in time to the 911 call, or that she wasn't there for the shooting. I could not see a third way of interpreting that data.
Thank you. I have no other questions for this witness.
All right, cross.
Detective Werther, you had submitted a report on 12/26/2019, is that correct?
That sounds correct.
And have you had a chance to review that at all before your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. So you found some interestingly contrasting things in your report that you reported on that date. You made a note of his daily text message of love and devotion to me. Do you remember that?
I do not.
Okay. Then you also made a note of his interactions with women he was attempting to date. Is that correct?
I do remember that.
Okay. Detective Werther, in your report on page 103, you indicate that Charles went to the airport to meet Florence Hughes and found that she
Object to
never boarded.
relevance.
Is that correct?
Hold on.
Object to relevance.
What's the relevance of that?
It's just in his report, Your Honor, and I was just going over it to see if,
Well, everything in a police report isn't necessarily relevant. Well, how's it relevant to this case?
it's relevant to show what was going on in this, right before this happened. These
All right.
events happened within June and July.
All right, it's the objection sustained.
Did you learn who Florence Hughes was?
And I'm going to object again to relevance.
Sustained.
In your report, Detective, you find evidence that Charles did in fact send someone $1,000.
And I would object to relevance again.
Sustained.
And I would object to relevance to all of these types of questions.
When you had, what was your role in going through the data from the phone, from my husband's phone?
So primarily I went through the location data because of the concerns we had about timeline. I know I went through other data associated with other accounts, but I don't believe I specifically went through the phone extraction outside of the location data.
Okay. But in your report, you made a lot of notes to these things, but that wasn't what you were looking for? You just happened upon it? How did that happen?
So there are things found, I think many of those may be related to a Google account. And yes, as certain things were being accomplished as a team, sometimes you'll task out and say, would you look through this to see what you find that may be relevant? And it isn't always clear up front in an investigation what's going to be relevant. So when I see communications between people without knowing the full story, particularly when I'm not the primary case agent, I may note things because I want to make sure the case agent knows of them so he or she can decide if that's a thing that needs to be pursued further. And if they think it is, then they can ask me or someone else, or they can do it themselves. But that would be why some of those things are documented.
Okay. And you wrote them in your report because you thought they might be relevant?
Yes, not knowing the full case, I noted things like that that may be relevant.
And that would need to go to the case agent so he could decide if those were relevant or not as well.
Correct. The case agent has much fuller information, particularly as a long-term investigation goes on. As somebody who's just helping out with certain tasks, it's not always obvious to you what things are going to be relevant to the person who knows the entirety of the case.
So you mentioned in your report that on July 10th, there was a scheduled phone date with Nancy Jo Hancock. Is that correct?
I think I did indicate that in my report, yes.
Okay. And then on the next day, there was another date scheduled with a Jennifer Gilbert at 12 o'clock.
That sounds correct.
And then the next day, there was another date
Your Honor, I'm
scheduled
gonna-
with a Juliet at 10 a.m.
And obviously
Right.
trying to smear the victim.
All right, the objection sustained.
Detective, did you find searches for these dates
Can I
for my
object?
husband back
Hold
to?
on.
If we can do
Hold
a
on.
sidebar.
Sustained.
This is a different
What-
question,
no,
Your Honor.
Whether he went on dates or had dates scheduled is not relevant to this case. Ask another question. You can ask about the date of the person that testified the night before because that person was in here and had some relevant information. But other than that, any of these other questions are not relevant.
Detective, you talked about going with Detective Moffett to the hotel room where you found my husband's laptop. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And then was also his iPad in there?
I believe so.
And then you said some suitcases,
Correct.
maybe his briefcase was like a rolling suitcase?
It may have been, we may be describing the same thing differently. I didn't personally inventory the items. I helped to package them and take them back to the station.
Okay. So when you got there, does that stuff go in evidence bags? I mean, how does that work when you got to the hotel room? Can you walk us through that?
Sure, there are different ways that one can do it. Pardon me. If the crime had occurred at the hotel room, it might be done in a different way. In this case, just clearing out someone's hotel room instead of unpacking everything there and searching through all of it in the hotel room and then repacking it all there. Sometimes it's much more appropriate to take the items as they are, seal them up, take them back to the station and impound them where they can be dealt with later as needed. So that's what we did in this case.
And then so with the electronic devices, were they off already or were they on? How did that work out?
I didn't check the condition of them, but I also didn't alter the condition of them.
So nobody got on there and opened it up or anything to see if it was powered on or not?
I did not do that.
Okay. And it was just you and Detective Moffett in there, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So after you collect all those things and then you take them with you to go to evidence, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And so how long about do you think that you were there at that hotel room?
I no longer recall exactly how long we were there.
And then is someone documenting that, like as you're,
Got safety protocols? Granger has the safety pros to call.
What the items are, yes. So we do document what the items are that we're taking, typically by at the station entering that into our report management system where they're assigned numbers like the one that you saw for the cell phone earlier. And then an evidence continuity begins when they're submitted to the property and evidence unit.
and then was there anything left in there that wasn't taken? I mean, just kind of clear out all of his things,
Anything left in the room?
correct?
I do not believe we left anything in the room.
Okay. So then all of the things were taken into custody and that was the end of your association with them?
That's right.
Okay. But you were instrumental in delivering them, is that correct?
Yes, I assisted in packaging and delivering them, yes.
And that was just you and Detective Moffett?
Yes, that's right.
In the course of your investigation, Detective, did you become aware of the $2 million life insurance policy Charles had on me?
I'm not aware of that.
In the course of your investigation, with my husband's phone, did you come across the threatening text messages from him to me?
I don't believe I saw text message content from his phone. From the phone, I restricted what I was looking at to the location data I'd been given. So I'm not aware of contents of the phone.
Okay. And then, Detective, what was your role back at the house at Four Peaks Place? Approximately what time did you arrive and then leave the scene?
I arrived, it's indicated in my report, and I wouldn't want to hazard a guess because I don't recall, but I remained at the scene essentially, as mentioned, to shadow and observe the way these investigations are conducted. I know I was still there when the medical examiner arrived. I know I was still there when Mr. Cox came back, but exactly what time I left, I do not know.
Okay. And you mentioned you were shadowing Detective Kuntz, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did you stay with him the whole time?
Yes.
And so you just kind of helped him doing what he was doing?
Yes, and I'm not confident how much I was there helping as much as observing. I didn't actually perform any particular tasks while I was there because, again, I was not on the team yet.
So you were observing mostly?
Mostly.
And then did you take notes while you were observing or just
I did not.
physical with the eyes?
I was just there to observe, yeah.
Okay. You had mentioned that you had called me on July 12th, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that I had told you that I had when you asked me about information about JJ's school, I gave that to you, correct?
Correct.
And then I told you that I had the hotel key, is that correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that you'd send someone over to pick it up.
Well, yes,
Correct.
I said I would check with the case agent, and that's probably what would happen.
And then, so did you contact Detective Moffett and discuss that with him?
I did.
And then he sent you over to the house to get it?
Well, we agreed to go together. Oh, to the house, I'm sorry.
Oh, to come pick up the card key?
Yes, I think we agreed that I would go do that, yes.
Okay, what about time was that? Was that on the 12th?
It was on the 12th. It's in my report. I think it was the 2 o'clock hour.
Okay. And then you weren't with Detective Moffett at that time?
I was not.
And then when did you guys actually go to the hotel to pick up that stuff?
We went right after that.
Oh, it was immediate?
Yes.
How long, Detective, did you analyze all this data before you did your report?
Well, that could be a complicated question because initially I only looked at the location data I'd been provided. And initially we were only dealing with the location data for Mr. Vallow's phone. And then I wasn't heavily involved in the investigation after that point. As I recall, I was actually out of town some, and so I wasn't heavily involved. And then if you advance to some years later when I had learned more how to interpret cell phone records, and those cell phone records still existed, I was asked to look at them and to incorporate them into an overall analysis. So that now we're talking about something that occurred several years later. And the exact amount of time I spent doing that, I don't know exactly how long that would have been. I still did restrict my analysis to just that one calendar day.
In the first place, and then you got more data later?
I know there is more data, but I have not gone through and done a thorough analysis of all of the data that has been assembled over the course of whatever time frame has been determined to be relevant in this case. I was asked to look at the day of the event.
Okay. But you had other data in this report that was dated 12/26, is that correct?
Yeah, that seems right.
How long before that 12/26 report did you spend compiling data? That's kind of my question, like weeks or months or just a few days?
I'm not sure I fully understand that question. So if this is what you're asking, when you write, for example, a search warrant to an internet service provider, let's say for somebody's Google or for something similar to that, once you send that, you just have to wait. And at some point they give it back to you. And then once they give it back to you, you go through it and you see what's contained in that. You save it to the side as evidence, and then you create a copy so you can go through that. And that's what I did. The amount of time I spent doing that, that's not something that we log.
Okay. But your report goes from, I guess, Bates page 88 to 105, so about 8 pages worth of data, yeah? Say?
I'm not sure, is that a question?
Or maybe it was even longer. Did you go to Lawrence Life Academy at any point?
I did not.
And were you able to identify JJ in the front seat of the car at the Burger King?
I wouldn't say that I can definitely identify him.
That you indicate possible juvenile with short dark hair in front passenger seat. Is that correct?
That's what I was able to see on the video.
Okay. That's all we have, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
When you went to the True Hilton Hotel and picked up Olive Charles Vallow's personal property, did you ever review anything from his laptop? Were you provided with extractions from his laptop that you reviewed?
I think I was at one point provided that, yes.
Did you use any of that data from the laptop in creating your PowerPoint?
No,
Did you review anything, any extractions from his iPad?
I don't believe I reviewed the iPad.
So obviously, did you use that in your PowerPoint?
No.
In your understanding, why were you only asked to look at the day of July 11th of 2019?
My understanding specifically was because we were looking at the very significant to us fact that the timelines that we had been told appeared to be inaccurate. The purpose of what I looked at was to examine whether that inaccuracy was supported by or refuted by various different types of location data, video data, other evidence. And again, that's specifically what I looked at, is does it appear that this device, as I had been told, was actually traveling with Miss Vallow, or does it not appear to be the case? And Doesn't matter to me what the outcome was, but as you can see, there are indications that it was. Beyond that, if someone had asked me, oh, well, now there's some relevant question we want you to look at an expanded timeline for, I would have been happy to do so, but I was not asked to do that in this case.
So were you trying to determine whether or not it was accurate if you had not or been advised that the shooting occurred just before 911 was called?
Correct.
And did what you learned match up with that?
No, again, as I said, I will say that the device has clearly departed the scene well before the 911 call and does not return until after the 911 call. The distances make it entirely implausible that the device went all that way that quickly, plus the timestamps are logged prior to the event. And so again, I could see only two possible interpretations. Either the shooting happened much earlier than we were told, or the device and the person bearing it, which I understand to be Ms. Vallow, left well before the shooting occurred. I don't see a third option.
Thank you. No other questions?
Are there any questions for this witness from any member of the jury? I don't see any. Sir, you can step down.
Thank you.
All right, members of the jury, I've been informed that a witness that was scheduled for this afternoon has become ill and would not be able to appear this afternoon. So we're going to break early for the day. The schedule for the rest of the week will be 10:30 to 4:30 for Wednesday and Thursday. So plan on 10:30 to 4:30 for both of those days. You're free to go for the rest of the day. Please remember the admonition. We'll see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m.
All right, for the jury.
And are we going to have any last words from the judge after the jury leaves? So 10:30 start Arizona time. That's 11:30 time for me. So half-hour delay makes for a noon start time again. Okay. Let's see. There was
Anything else before we recess from the state?
Yep, as it cut out awfully quick there. We didn't get to hear the answer. I'm hoping that there was nothing, but we don't really know. So let's do this again at noon tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.